Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. Today we want to talk about some of the restaurant tips and laws and regulations around that. The Fair Labor Standards Act, which defines, employees and regulates everything that we talk about today, is defining the tipped employees are those who are making more than $30 per month in tips above their regular wages. Well, hopefully most of our restaurant employees are making that, so that means that all of these employees should be sort of reporting as taxable income all of these tips. And it also sort of gives a leeway to restaurants to pay them at a lower hourly rate that Irene and I discussed before. And I think Irene is going to kind of touch upon that a little bit later. But we basically have to claim that, and we're going to have to report as a restaurant and as an employee. We have to pay taxes on it and report it as your income. And I really wanted to kind of go back to Irene and talk about the tip credits and all the regulations that we think our owners should be distributing and the proper way of communication and tracking it.
Thank you so much, Jane. So, like with any other industry, hospitality is a very heavily regulated industry, but we have some interesting exceptions in within the hospitality industry. And so, under both the FLSA and New York labor laws, we have these established minimum wage laws that hopefully all of our clients and all of our listeners are well aware of. And then every industry has their certain other limitations. And we've talked a little bit about the differences in healthcare. So with hospitality, one of the deviations would be this tip credit, which would allow potentially an employer to pay less than that minimum wage so long as the tips allow the employee to reach the minimum wage threshold that's there. And that's going to be referred to as that tip credit, or rather the amount that the employer wouldn't be otherwise required to pay, like that difference, that delta there. But the amount of the tip credit that's allowable depends on certain factors. It depends on the employer's industry, general industry, the size of the industry as well. It also depends on whether or not the employee's duties fall within those that would be eligible for tip credits. And so it differs a little bit in the restaurant setting, of course, than from any other industry that we've talked about in the past. It's also very important, and I know we talk about this all the time, documentation notice, documentation notice. Same thing here. So the tip credit is permissible. However, one of the most important legal requirements that there are is that the employees are notified of the tip credit policy. They have to make sure that they know exactly what that minimum threshold is going to be, that they receive their wage notices, and that they have the exact policy for tip credits listed there. And then one other thing that is different in the hospitality industry would be tip pooling as well. Tip pooling would be putting all those tips together and then dividing them. And also there are some requirements there. Once again, making sure that everyone's notified. Once again, making sure that it's all documented, that everyone signed that acknowledgement. This documentation is going to be the most important part, really, for any topic we talk about, but here specifically because it is a big requirement to make sure that the employees are in the know. And then one of the most important things for tip pooling is for eligibility is going to be whether or not the duties of that employee fall under those that are permissible for tip pooling. And that's something to review, or is this typically going to be a tip eligible employee, someone who would otherwise be permitted to pool their tips together or not. And there's, of course, guidelines and certain thresholds that we have to meet for that as well. And we make sure that we want to stay in those guidelines. Otherwise, again, there could be a violation of that tip pooling or the tip credit percentages, and that may bring an employer under that minimum wage that's required to be paid. So something to be very, very careful of and make sure that you're following. If there are any questions on this, and I know that's a lot of information, but if there are any questions on anything at all, please feel free to reach out to Jane or I, and we're always here happy to help.
Thanks, everyone.